'Cause I'm addicted to what you and I realize. Lead the way, I follow. No need to say where we are heading now, babe. I follow to the edge of it all. So tell your good night, 'cause I'll find no matter what, yeah. Susceptible now, before the moment flies, before it flies. So tell your good night, 'cause I'll find no matter what. Susceptible now, before the moment flies, yeah. In this moment, yes, I cannot say what's wrong or right. No, it's not hard to fool me. No, 'cause I'm addicted to the good life. Yes, yeah. Lead the way, I follow. No need to say where we are heading now, babe. I follow to the edge of it all, to the edge of it all. So tell your good night, 'cause I'll find no matter what, yeah. Susceptible now, before the moment flies. Ooh, so tell your good night, 'cause I'll find no matter what. Ooh, susceptible now, before the moment flies. It's not a problem, no, 'cause I know what I'm getting into. Yes, yeah, and nothing can stop me. No, 'cause I'm addicted to what you and I realize. Lead the way, I follow. No need to say where we are heading now, babe. I follow to the
What's up, everyone? I'm Rob. I'm the guy. Yeah, see, it doesn't work, Shay. I'm sorry.
I'll pretend to be Murph. I am the maintenance man.
Why
And
does it
then,
sound
hey
like a
guys,
robot?
it's me for real. It's Shay. What's up? How's it going? I'm the noob. Welcome to the waiting table.
See, it
See-
doesn't work. I can't say I'm the guy. I'm the boy. No, see, it doesn't work the same way.
Maybe one day you'll learn. I think also too, Murph isn't here. I think that kind of messed with your mojo a little bit, I can tell.
Yeah. I need my Murph. I need my Murph. Thank you
I
guys for
know.
joining us on another episode of the Waiting Table podcast, where we have roundtable discussions about the hottest topics in weight loss with, of course, the coolest people from the bariatric community. I'm Rob, we got Shay, and we got you guys. So grab a chair, wind down from your busy day, and take a seat at the table. As Shay mentioned tonight, Murph is taking a much-deserved night off. So Shay, what's going on?
Yeah, well, first of all, shout out. I know Murph is probably watching, and I'm just proud of him. I'm so grateful that he felt safe enough to say that he needed some time, and he's listening to his body, and he's doing that. I just think that's super cool. So hopefully use that as an encouragement. If you need that, you should do that too. So yeah, things are good. It's been a busy couple of weeks. Yeah, this is kind of the first time I've been able to just sit and go, yeah, it's been a busy week, but I'm happy to be here tonight.
Me too. And we are going to have a really, really, really good show today. I'm super excited for it. You want to share with everyone what we got going on tonight?
Yeah, you bet. So I'm so excited that we have Haley here tonight. And Haley is she's the first bariatric dietitian that I actually found on Instagram. And I remember I was telling my husband this story earlier today. I remember we were in Hawaii. I had just decided to get bariatric surgery. So I was like on the internet trying to find people who I could like get more information from. And Haley's account is one of the first ones that I saw. And I just loved her approach with seeing food as nutrition. I love that she's very holistic in the way that she approaches things. She's like the opposite of diet culture-y. She just has really great information that she shares. She's a super kind person. And the thing that stood out to me about her is she actually reached out to me. And I was kind of like, oh my gosh, like, somebody like reached out to me in the bariatric community. I was kind of like nervous at first.
You fangirl so much.
I really do. I do. Well, not as much anymore because I realize like, oh, these are just normal people. But in the beginning, it's kind of intimidating going into a community that you don't know. You don't know what like the culture is or the vibe. So totally fangirling. And I probably still will a little bit with Haley tonight. But so I'm just so excited to have her here. So let's bring on Haley. Hello.
Hey, Haley.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Very good.
Thank you for being here. I'm so excited.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Well, do you want to just kind of introduce yourself a little bit and just kind of share just a bit about who you are, what you do, all that fun stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Haley, the Guac'Ward Dietitian. I have been a registered dietitian for 6 years now. I've only ever worked with bariatric patients. I've worked in a couple different weight loss clinics. And then during COVID, I feel like that's what like everybody did, right? During COVID, everybody like created an Instagram and like, figured out how they can do this whole virtual thing. That's when I launched my Instagram page. That's when I started like taking on clients privately. And I mean, well, you guys know the bariatric community is massive, and it just, I mean, it took off pretty quickly. And so I'm so fortunate, to be able to do this, to work for myself full time, to work with like what I think are the coolest people ever. I tell everyone like I have what I think is the coolest job because I just feel like I'm talking to friends all day long. Like so many people are like, don't you get exhausted being on Zoom? And I'm like, not really, because I'm just like talking to my friends. Like, I mean, we talk about, their weight loss goals and we talk about all that stuff, but like, that's just, I mean, we talk about everything. So, and I get to do cool things like this. So it's just a really it's been a very cool thing that's opened up a lot of doors for me. So
that's awesome. And I'm curious, what got you interested in bariatric surgery specific or I'm not saying that right, to be a bariatric dietitian?
That's a really good question. Honestly, I just kind of fell into it. It was not something when I was in school. I think I had maybe one lecture on it. It was not something that it's definitely, I think, more up and coming. And I think we're really seeing the positive effects that, bariatric surgery can have on people. It was not something that we really learned about in school. And, I kind of make this joke sometimes. I remember when I was in my dietetic internship, one of the girls in my program, we were going around, everybody was saying what they wanted to do. I thought I wanted to be like a sports dietitian. And she said, oh, I want to work in bariatrics. And I was like, okay, like, I don't even know what you're talking about right now. And then actually, honestly, it was my first job offer that I got. And I was like, well, we're just going to go for it, see if I like it. And I mean, I couldn't imagine doing anything else now. I mean, just like, I feel like in nutrition, there's just so many areas, right? But what I've found in bariatrics is the longevity that I get with people and like the transformations. Like you don't see that anywhere else. You truly do not see that anywhere else. Like, and even my clients, that are 2, 3, 4, 5 years out from surgery, at that point, they're my client who had bariatric surgery. They're not my bariatric client, but like, it's still relevant, and it's still there. And so to me, that was like the coolest thing when I, had patients at my very first job that I saw consistently for the entire like 2.5 years that I was there. And so that was like, I'm never going to be able to do this in any other fields, I feel like. So yeah, I kind of just fell into it, and now I'm not leaving. So,
and we scooped you up, and we're not giving you back. We're like,
There you
Haley
go.
gets to stay with us.
That's awesome. So a couple questions, and I think I'm fortunate to have a job that similar to yours is something that I just feel intrinsically makes a big difference, and I really, really enjoy. And what's the biggest thing you take away from what you do as a dietitian, but specifically working with the bariatric community?
honestly, it's so funny you asked that too, because I have learned more working with my clients than like I could in any other realm. I feel like that's truly transformed me in like so many ways. And like my clients teach me things. Like I tell some of my clients, I'm like, you're like my life coach, man. Like, cause we'll be having a conversation and we'll be talking about, and I really like to relate like food to real life kind of scenarios and ways that they can sort of visualize it, and like also kind of connect those dots. Like, oh yeah, if I wouldn't do that this way, like why would I do this with my food or whatever? So it's just been really, really cool because I just learned from them. I don't even know. I can't even point out one single topic. It's just like, I'll be like, man, maybe I should work on that myself. Like maybe that's something I should be, really, really aware of. So, I mean, I'm just learning every single day, truly. But, I think with that too, it's helped me never have I, lived in a larger body. So it's really helped me to kind of obviously like I, can never fully relate, but to understand and to open my eyes to things that like, have I not worked with this population, they wouldn't be things that would cross, my,
Yeah, definitely.
So.
Oh, that's awesome.
I love that. Well, I know, can we jump into like kind of asking you a few questions?
Now we're going to start grilling you.
I know. No,
this is the interrogation part of the podcast.
We'll still ask you personal stuff along the way, or if there's anything personal you want to share, go for it. But I know, like, I'm putting myself back when I found your page and like when I was just kind of learning more about bariatric surgery, and we have people, that are in all different seasons of their bariatric journey, people who maybe like are just sort of starting to look into it, who've made the decision to go forward with it, who are, new, like pre-op getting ready to have the surgery, who have just had the surgery, we have a full gamut. But I'm thinking more of like where I was when I had made the decision to have the surgery. And then I was kind of like, now what? Like the impression that I had of bariatric surgery before learning about it was, okay, I'm going to have to eat differently for the rest of my life. I'm going to have to eat small portions. I'll never really be able to eat much again. So long to like ice cream and things like that. I'll never be able to have like sweets and stuff again. This is going to be like a lifestyle diet for the rest of my life. Like, and that was kind of like, do I still want to do it? I had a conversation with my husband, like, this probably means I can never have like a Dairy Queen Blizzard ever again. Is it still worth doing it? And, so I'm just curious from your perspective, working with so many different people within, the bariatric community, can you kind of talk about some of like the common myths that people have when it comes to nutrition, and what are myths and what are the truths, I guess, with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think you definitely hit the nail on the head of like, I'm never going to be able to do this again, or I'm never going to be able to do that again, or I'm only going to be able to eat this much. And it's just like things that came out of thin air a lot of times. Like, I have these conversations with clients all the time where they say something and I'm like, but where's the rationale behind that? Right. Like that's kind of just and a lot of times it is, a thought fueled by years and years of dieting and, poor relationship with food. And then, what you see on social media, or what you see on TV, right. And all of that stuff. And it builds up just like this expectation of like, I'm not going to eat normal again. Everything I eat's going to make me sick. I'm only going to be able to eat 2 bites, and I get messages from people all the time like, what's wrong with me? Like, I see these people on Instagram and they get full of 2 bites and like, that's not me. Like I can eat, you know, and I can tolerate and nothing's making me sick. And I'm like, that's the goal. That's the goal though. The goal is not for you to be miserable all the time, like barely eating anything. Like that's the complication side. Like that's not, you know, what we want here. You know, the goal is to nourish your body. And I think a lot of times it's almost like this thought that like food is just like gonna go away. Like we don't need food anymore. Definitely common ones. I feel, you know, 1,000 calories. This is like that number came out of thin air. I don't know where it came from. I know a lot of surgery centers do kind of push that a lot. I do not give my clients calorie goals. I think that kind of just, you know, 99% of them fuels. I mean, you know, majority of my clientele is typically women who have a chronic dieting history. It's just not usually something I find productive because then it's like, well, if we give you a calorie goal and then the day they go over it, they're like, oh my gosh, like I've ruined everything. Or, you know, under it and then just like not really being in tune with their body because like, oh my gosh, now I have to hit this calorie goal. I have to force myself, you know, to eat. So I feel just in general, honestly, 1,000 calories aside, there's just this like, oh, I'm 6 months out. I should be eating this many calories. I'm a year out. I should be eating this many calories, or I should be eating this much, you know, I should only be eating half a cup of food or whatever. And it's just like, just because you had bariatric surgery, like that's, I mean, you have that in common with other people, but that's just one factor, right? Like I have green eyes. Okay, that doesn't mean I need to eat the same food that other people with green eyes have. Like it's just one, you know, piece of the puzzle in everything else that's going on. So I feel like the calorie one is, in the portion sizes in general, is probably like one of the bigger ones that people tend to think is one size fits all. And, you know, just like a scary thing if you're not doing that, you know, in comparison to what other people are doing.
Yeah. And I think that I definitely had that, especially like right after my surgery, you know, how my program was, it gave me a booklet of like what to follow and what to do.
Mhm.
And I get it from like the program's perspective of what they give out to patients is like for the majority, they need to streamline it to some degree because they have to give kind of basic outline principles so people can follow it easily. But I remember, again, coming from more of that diet culture, I've been a chronic dieter my whole life, and having that mindset of like, if I don't do this exactly right, I'm going to screw up, like, and I'm going to gain all my weight back. The surgery is not going to work for me, all this stuff. And the ironic thing that I've been just finding for myself is what got me to that place is I was not taught how to listen to hunger cues, listen to fullness cues. I want to also separate to obesity as a disease. Like, and so I was predisposed for that. But in addition to that, it's like, I wasn't trained how to listen to my body and critically think for myself and make connections between, oh, like I'm feeling this certain way. What food could help support my body in that? And so I've been on a journey of that for the last few years. And so it's just kind of ironic that people who, you know, tend to have that fear. And I was one of them of kind of, you know, if I don't stick to 1,000 calories or if I don't do it exactly this way, I'm going to fail. When in reality, the bigger issue is like, no, like I need to listen to my body. I need to trust my body and like actually lean into that. And that's what I hear you say. And that's so cool that you work with clients from that perspective, it sounds like.
Absolutely. Because I think that's just like you said, right? Like all of that stuff is a big factor, like of all of this, you know, in the first place. And it's like, you know, we're just kind of fueling that diety mindset if we don't break through those thoughts because, you know, I mean, it's a big decision, right? Like this is probably for many people one of the biggest decisions they've ever made in their lives. And I totally understand like wanting to do everything perfect because it is like, man, like I can't screw this up. You know, if I'm on Weight Watchers and I fall off, okay, you know, whatever, I can restart it next week. But this is like your life, you know, this is a big, big thing. And so you want to do everything you possibly can. So I totally understand that, like, wanting to follow the rules, you know, to a T for sure. And of course, I encourage everybody, you know, that post-op diet is there for a reason, but it's also kind of, you know, as you're, you know, after you're healed and down the road, how does that bariatric world and your world kind of morph together to be a lifestyle for you?
Right. Right. So do your clients get to have ice cream again? I think that's the biggest question, Haley. What are your thoughts on that? I know I'm kind of saying it jokingly, but people like that's honestly what I wanted to know back then.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's totally different for everybody. I would say, for some people that is, hey, like I can have, a Yasso frozen yogurt bar, right? And for some people that is, you know what? I'm, at a stage in my journey where when I take my kids out to ice cream in the summer and, sometimes I decide I want to have a scoop, sometimes I have a bite of theirs and sometimes I don't have it, and I definitely, I mean, those are the things. It's funny because I feel like people think that like, oh, so you just like write people meal plans. And I'm like, no, like we talk about these real life things like, hey, Haley, like it's the summertime. I'm, having all these social events or like, how am I supposed to handle these? Like, how am I supposed to live my life without totally neglecting like this side of things and making sure I'm nourishing my body, appropriately. So yes, absolutely. I mean, 100% across the board. When it was the holidays, for my clients who are at an appropriate stage for this, we were talking about, okay, how are we incorporating alcohol in a mindful way or those Christmas cookies or, whatever they got going on at that time that is important to them and they want to incorporate and how can we do that in a sustainable, way. So, I mean, long-term, all foods can fit. Obviously, it just depends on the person, like in your sensitivities. Obviously, if you're a little bit more sensitive to sugar or fat, that's a different story. But, I would say for most, things, yes, there is a way that we can kind of do it. It might not always be the same. I mean, it won't be the same as it was prior to surgery, in some capacity, but, there's definitely ways that we're able to do so. So.
I like how you mentioned sort of combining, or how does that sort of that bariatric life or post-bariatric life sort of meld into, your current life or where you want to go. And I think that's where I get a lot of the questions in regards to diet. I'm almost 3 years out in September. And so, I post about sort of like I just did a reset in regards to my diet, just so I can understand a baseline. I wasn't training for the past couple months, leading up to now where I'm going to start ramping up training again. And my intake is significantly different, right? Like when I have my baseline versus when I start incorporating exercise. And I know that a lot of people sort of start freaking out a bit when they start being very active and looking at whether it's just calories or whether it's macro or whether it's looking at your total intake, because they sort of freak out because they've been so used to, as you had mentioned, that post-bariatric idea. And I know in my program, they give you your booklet of, this is what you're eating, but they don't really specify that this is just after surgery, or it doesn't specify how long this is going to last. So a lot of people think that this is what I'm doing, right? So a year and a half after, I have a lot of people who'll contact me and say, I'm still eating this small amount. How do I try to balance it? I'm like, I don't think it was ever meant to be, this is your guide to eating for the rest of your life. This is sort of how to get through that phase, but everyone is sort of different. And so I guess that's my question. How do you manage? And if you do have clientele who are specific to this, people having their concerns about upping their intake overall for activity.
Yes, absolutely. That's a common question I get all the time because, it's like they don't want to be under fueling, but they also, it just depends on the page they're in their journey. But a lot of times I see people like, well, I don't want to be over fueling and then, slow down my weight loss or, gain back if they're, kind of in maintenance zone. And that's kind of the fun part for me because it is just like you guys said, right after surgery, when it's like, okay, you're on your liquid diet and you're on your puree diet. I mean, I can only I can't break the rules for you. I can't tell you, you can eat regular chicken on your puree diet, like those kinds of things. It's like, I'm just here to help you and support you and, be creative with you to make this work and get you on a schedule and, get your body what it needs. But ultimately it is kind of like, we just got to check those boxes as much as we can to get you through this. But then, once you're off that, it really is, how do we, make this that lifestyle for you. So one thing that I find really helpful for my clients is we will do some sort of, with most of them, not everyone, because again, it just totally depends, but a lot of them, I find it helpful to do some sort of like food diary recall, whether it's taking photos, whether it's writing it down in a journal. I've done spreadsheets with clients where we just have on one box protein and the other box says other, and then it just prompts them like, okay, I can't just eat protein for a meal. I need to have, something else with it. So I find that reflection is really helpful because then it gets them in the habit of checking in with their body. Well, geez, I had this breakfast and like I was hungry within an hour. Okay, well, that's a sign. If we're hungry in an hour, we need to be adding something to it. So it's a little bit of reverse psychology there, like trying to lead them to recognizing, hey, I need more fuel, right? Like, or if I go work out and, I just feel like I'm grazing the rest of the day, it's like, okay, well, let's bump up that post-workout meal a little bit. And actually, it's probably going to be less calories if you eat a little bit more at that time versus if you're chasing it all night long, and you're never really satisfying that hunger. Because that's something I see a lot too, is people try to keep those portions so small. And then they're just eating, 100-calorie snacks. And it's like, but if we just added a little bit more to that, and got you mentally and physically satisfied and had a balanced meal, we'd be good for, a couple of hours. So I really like to have people, just like Shay mentioned, like be in tune with their body and be able to listen to their body, because your body speaks to you. It's just, we're trying to learn how to listen, to it at that time. So I find that's quite helpful because it just allows you and gives you that flexibility, because also like one day you're going to be hungrier than others. Right. And so you also be able to identify that too. Like, oh, well, geez, this meal made me really, really full today, but like tomorrow it might not. And that's okay. So we work a lot on breaking down those, like, this is the baseline. It can be plus or minus from that baseline. Yeah. It's not a hard cut and dry rule. This is our middle line that we're using for reference. And then we decide, are we above or are we below that at that time?
Nice.
And Haley, you said something about balanced meals or balanced snacks, right? And I love the ideas that you give on your Instagram page, like of what that looks like. But for somebody who has never heard what are macros? What does that mean, a balanced meal? Can you explain that a little bit more? Just kind of the basic 101 nutrition in that way?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think in the bariatric world, we talk a lot about protein. We have our 3 main macronutrients, which basically means those are the most abundant nutrients that we're consuming, right? That protein, those carbohydrates, and those fats, right? Those are really the big nutrients that make up our foods. And so one thing I'll tell clients is, you have foods that are mostly protein, you have foods that are mostly carbohydrates, foods that are mostly fats, and then you have a lot of foods that have 2 of them or all 3, right? And so one of the things that I find helpful for people when we're talking about that balance is, ideally at a meal, we want to work towards having all 3. And then I usually say at a snack, if we can get 2 of them, if we can get all 3, that's great. But in the beginning, I think a lot of people struggle because it's not going to be balanced at first. Right at first, it's like, get your protein in, check that box, call it a day. But as time, it can sort of evolve, right, to where it's like, okay, we've got some protein, we've got some higher fiber carbohydrates, we've got some healthy fats, and those 3 together is really what's going to mentally and physically satisfy you, but carry you through, for much longer. I mean, it's like, you guys know, right? Like, how satisfying is drinking a Premier protein shake versus having, a grain bowl with, shrimp and beans and vegetable, right? Like, I mean, it's just, I think for most people, probably a lot more, enjoying. So that balance comes from a macronutrient standpoint, but it also comes from am I actually satisfied and enjoying this standpoint, right? Not just like, oh, I'm going to eat this chicken and sweet potatoes and broccoli because it checks all my boxes. But like, if you hate chicken and sweet potatoes and broccoli, like to me, that's not necessarily checking all of the boxes that go into what I'm talking about when I say balance.
Yeah. And I think another part of that is sort of, obviously we're in this situation because we have an emotional and mental tie with food, right? And I think there has to be sort of, or it's very difficult. Not everyone can look at food just as fuel. And I find because we are at this point in our life predisposed to have that connection, I think it's important. It's really important actually to enjoy your food, right? And I know that was one of the biggest hurdles that I had. I've always been a very sort of all or nothing type of dieter, trainer, everything, right? I'd work out really hard, I'd diet really hard, be awesome and very strict. It also means that when I'd fall off really hard, and then I would gain everything back, and I wouldn't do anything for months. And I think a big part of my mindset change was understanding that balance also meant that I was enjoying what I was eating, and I was feeling satisfied and feeling happy that I was eating those things. And I didn't feel like I was depriving myself, right? And I think that's a big part. And Erin made a good point here. She said that she finds the scale stops if you're under fueling, increasing calories, and including a well-balanced diet actually helped the scale keep moving for me. And I think a lot of times we get scared of going over that too much, right? Like, we are so strict. And as you had mentioned, that diet culture that we've all been a part of for many, many years, or some of us have at least, that's sort of ingrained in us. So there's a lot of hurdles, I think. And a lot of them are mental hurdles, not just physical hurdles, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I think 90% of the journey is that mental battle for sure. I mean, it's funny because it's like, I'm a dietitian, but I feel like I'm 50% dietitian, 50% therapist, because
Yeah.
it's not just about, I mean, it's not just about the food, it's all of the other factors. Like, I tell all my clients, I'm like, it's not that you don't know how to eat healthy. I don't doubt that. You probably can diet better than I can. It's all of these other things that are going into it, right, that are affecting it. The mental aspect, the emotional aspect. I mean, just like we talked about, living your life, right? And then now trying to morph that into being a bariatric patient, like, it's totally, a big mental game for sure.
Yeah. I think what that's looked like in my journey, or like just like a more tangible example, is getting to the point where I enjoy what I eat on a daily basis more than not. And so what I mean by that is, like, in the past, I would use vacations and like traveling as a way to escape my normal routine in a lot of ways. But when it came to food, it was like, okay, finally, I get to go have free reign on anything I want. I can eat what I want, when I want. I can overindulge and whatever. I just went to an all-inclusive resort in Mexico in February, which was awesome. And by the end of it, though, I was like, man, like, I'm kind of ready to get back to like the food I normally eat, every day. And it's not like I went overboard while I was at an all-inclusive. I got some questions about that, but it was cool to just kind of sit back and reflect on that, of like, wow, how cool is it that I've built a life that I want to go back to, that I eat foods that not only fuel my body, but that I enjoy preparing, I enjoy eating, and I'm worth that. I think before, in the past, there was just so much shame that was wrapped up in a lot of areas in my life. But the lies that would get fed a lot of times, pun intended, was, I'm not worthy of having foods that taste good. I can only have bland foods because that's what's healthy. And I just really disagree with that. That's not true. And that's exactly what you've been saying, but that's kind of how it showed up practically in my life. I eat foods that fuel my body, and they're also foods that I really enjoy and I look forward to having. And so it's cool to see that kind of more in a practical way in my life now, where it's just awesome.
Yeah. I mean, and how cool is it, right, to like go on a trip, right? And then like, it's not like, oh, I have to come home and start a diet, right? Like, no, I'm just going to go back home and keep doing what I've been doing, right? Like, I mean, it's no, reset or restrict or anything like that. It's just return back to, I mean, I think that's the coolest thing ever. Like, when clients tell me that, I'm like, that's like the ultimate win, I think, to, not have that automatic, like, oh, I got to restrict, mindset, or these are all the things I got to do. I got to cut all this stuff out, versus like, nope, I'm going to go home. I'm going to eat a little bit more, of this, do a little bit of that. And, that's always my big thing that I push, is like, it's not about taking everything away. It's, what are we adding here, right? What kind of healthy habits can we add? And I think that really, for a lot of people, promotes that sustainability side of things, versus, whenever you go on your typical diet, right? It's like, well, you can't have this, you can't have that, you can't have this, versus like, but what can we have? What are we, what are we focusing on here?
So, what are some of the things that you, or some of the discussions that you have with some of your clients to help them get into that mindset? Exactly what you guys had mentioned in regards to that vacation idea that, you got to come home and, you gorged on vacation. So now it's time to restrict again, right? And that again is something that's so ingrained. Like, how do you try to sort of foster that thought with a lot of your clients?
Yeah. So one of the things that I like to do with all of my clients is the first thing we start off with whenever we have a session is what is something positive that happened to you this past week? What is one win, that you've had? And it could be nutrition related. It could be, hey, I got a promotion at work. I don't care what it is. But I like to come in starting that session off with something positive because what do we always do? We go to we could be doing 10 things right. And we always go to that one thing that we didn't do. And that's something that I noticed with working with clients is, I'd say, well, how are things going since we spoke last? And they always go to, let's say we set 3 action steps. They always go to the one thing they didn't do. And I'm like, but what about these 5 other things that you did, do? So I always like to start it off kind of on a positive note. So we're not automatically going to, well, I went on vacation or it was the holidays, right? And these are all the things I didn't do. But what did we do, right? And so, okay, you were really great with your water on vacation. Okay, so if you did really great with your water on vacation, you've already got 1 box checked moving into this next week here, right? So we're focusing on like those things that are, for lack of a better word, the easiest for you to continue with, right? Because you've already been, continuing on with them. And so it's like, okay, let's carry that on, right? And I find a lot of times when they identify one thing, then they're like, oh, but then I did this. Or when I'm doing this, it makes it a lot easier to do this, right? A lot of times those habits kind of, well, when I'm drinking more water, I'm snacking less because I'm focusing on sipping my water between my meals, right?
Right.
They kind of domino off of each other. So I like to kind of move it into a positive way of, okay, what were we doing, right? And then, okay, where did we fall short? Let's pick one thing that we, we're struggling with, right? And, from there, okay, what is like one step above that we can do, right? Like, okay, man, I really did not hit my protein goal. Okay, let's just try to get some protein in each of your meals. I'm like, I don't care what type it is. I don't care how much it is. Let's just like one step above what we were doing last week, right? And I think that really helps people to build that confidence of like, hey, I can do things, right? Because
Right.
a lot of times when we try to do everything, we do nothing.
Yeah.
Or that, well, I have to get all my protein in and I have to eat 5 cups of vegetables a day. And it's like the moment one of those things doesn't happen, forget it. So just kind of building that confidence slowly, I find really helps people. And then, like I said, they kind of like domino off of each other a little
Yeah.
bit. So, and then, just, okay, let's do that for a little bit. And then let's raise the bar a little bit higher and just, we're climbing the ladder is usually what I tell people. We can't get to step 5 until we've got the first 4 down. Especially because I find so many of my clients struggle with that all or nothing mentality, right?
Yeah.
And, it's what I see a lot happens too is like, we compare, okay, I went on vacation. Well, I didn't do, X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, but you're comparing it to what you would do at home. Of course you didn't do what you do at home because you're not at home, right? It's different. So
Right.
just because it's different doesn't mean it's wrong either, right? Like in that scenario, and I try to like run them through, like kind of think back, okay, like at that restaurant though, what were your options, right? Okay, well, those were your options and you chose this. So that was the best choice in that scenario, right? Or maybe it wasn't. So what can we do next time now that you're a little bit more, prepared upon it? So we do a lot of reflection on it and diving into specific scenarios and like in that moment, what was your thought process? What were the resources around, was it something that maybe I really encourage my clients to, the portal that I use is like an app they can text me on. So I'll be like, ask for help, right? Like you don't have to make these, decisions on your own if you're unsure. Or again, we just reflect on it. We talk about it together, and now you've got a game plan for the next time that
Yeah.
happens. I call it practicing. I tell everybody you have to practice. Like you can't do these things if you don't practice. And so I was practicing, right?
Yeah.
And that's a
Not
great approach too, because I think, with everything that you had mentioned, it's one thing to sort of look at that all or nothing mentality that a lot of us have. But I think you're also fostering the idea of grace with ourselves and being kind to yourself, because I think bariatric or former bariatric patients, we are notorious for being very hard on ourselves, which sort of digs us into a deeper hole at that time. So, I love that approach. It's great.
Yeah. Well, and as humans, we're hard on ourselves, right? Like, I love that approach too, because what you're helping people see is you're asking them questions instead of coming from a shaming point that I know a lot of us have had, either from parents, from people in our lives, from doctors. I know for me, it took me a while to realize, like, oh, sometimes people just want to help, right? Like, and they don't always know how, but that's very much what I'm getting from you, Haley. It's like you ask questions because you're cheering your clients on, like you want them to do well and achieve the goals that they have for themselves. And I think that's why I was so drawn to your page, because you gave practical tools on how to do that, but I never felt like you were trying to sell something to me. And I think that's something that I've just seen in kind of the Instagram culture where, this diet will make you lose all this weight, or if you just do this one thing, you'll do all of that. And I just love that you're encouraging people to think for themselves and process things. And that's just really cool. So kudos.
Oh, thank you.
Also, Murph just shared, Haley, thank you so much for being on the waiting table. Bummed I can't be there. Hopefully we'll meet up on episode 2. Love y'all. God bless. Savannah, Murph's sister, said, you guys are looking great. And she suggested that it's because Murph isn't here, or possibly I suggested that, but she didn't disagree. So thank you, Murph, for tuning in. And we look forward to doing episode 2 and having you meet Haley.
I love it.
So one of my questions that I often like to ask in regards to, some of the dietitians that I work with, or I've met through the bariatric community, really comes down to, I think, sort of the fear that people have in regards to the foods that they can eat. Obviously, I think we go into it fearing that we won't be able to eat certain foods. And then as we go through our program or our process and we get more used to the foods that we're eating, I think we get scared of I think that we're really scared of a lot of different things as we're going through this whole progress. But it's, what can I eat later on? What can I not eat later on? Are certain things going to, push me back to where I was before? Are certain things going to have other triggers that might do certain things? And I think a lot of, those fears might be irrational, or they might come from somewhere. How do you deal with those types of questions that you have with your clients?
So this definitely, I think a lot of times kind of stems back to that diet culture too, right? Especially when, you're on a diet, right? And the diet is like, well, in this diet, I don't eat, sweets, right? And so it's like, well, when you're on the diet, you don't eat sweets, right? But the moment you have one cookie, all of a sudden you're off the diet, right? And so kind of normalizing here that there are no hard cut and rule, or hard cut and dry rules of like when and how much we can, have something, right? And we get to determine like what that looks like for us. And that comes in different stages with, different clients, and just depending on where they're at in their journey, because, I've had clients where it's like, hey, we tried to reintroduce this food and just, they find that they're just mindlessly snacking on it all day. And so maybe we set boundaries around when we have that food, right? Maybe it's, okay, I don't keep this food in the house, but, if it's something I want to have, I'll go out, I'll go to the store and I'll get, the individual bag of chips or whatever it may be, and I'll allow myself to have it, right? So sometimes we have to set boundaries with it. Sometimes it's a little bit of practice in kind of normalizing the food as well. So a lot of times what I like to do with clients is kind of run them through a couple questions. Number one, are you in a place where medically it would be appropriate for you to do this, right? So like if you're on your puree diet, we're probably not having potato chips.
Yeah.
Number two, are you meeting what I like to call, and I talk about this a lot on Instagram, your non-negotiables? So like, are you getting in your protein, your fiber, your fluids, your vitamins? kind of those really universal non-negotiables. And then I think everybody kind of has their own ones. Like, you know, some of my clients, it might be, I need to have dinner with my family at the table 3 nights a week, or I need to meal prep on Sundays, or I just feel totally out of whack for the week. Or, you know, it doesn't even have to be food related. It can be, you know, for my clients who are big into the gym, like I have to get up and go to my exercise class at 6 a.m. or it's not going to happen, right? So what are those things that help you kind of function and fuel your body in all ways, physically, mentally, emotionally, to feel your best? And then number 3, I'll have them kind of ask themselves, do you feel you are in a good headspace to introduce this currently in that moment and in general, right? Because I think a lot of times too, right, these trigger foods, something's triggering why we want to have it, right? So if we had a stressful day at work, this is probably not the best time to come home and introduce chocolate chip cookies, right? If that were the trigger food, right? So maybe that's a time where, you know, it's the family party or something like that, right? Where it's like a pretty neutral zone. It's not fueled, you know, by anything specific. So I like to kind of run through those questions, and I do some pretty intentional planning with clients when they have very specific things, like if they have, you know, an event coming up and there's going to be a dessert there, or if it is potato chips, or for some of my clients, it's even just the concepts of like going out to a restaurant, for example. And so we will be very intentional with a plan, like, hey, on this day, you and your partner are going to go to this restaurant. You and I are going to pick out what you're going to order ahead of time, right? And just exposure, really just practicing. You know, so it depends on the person. Some people, we have to get really, really specific like that. And that's okay. And that, you know, really helps them to normalize this. It's like, there's no reason to feel guilty or wrong because we planned this. We said we were going to do it. Right. Versus some people, you know, maybe they didn't have as much of an emotional attachment to food. And it's more of just, hey, I just have to set some boundaries for myself of like, if I'm going to have dessert at the party, I'm going to make sure I finish my, you know, protein and veggies first. You know, I wait a little bit and I'm not, you know, standing by the snack table, you know, grazing. So the intensity of that just totally depends on the person and the food. But I think what's also important to kind of note here too is that like food, you mentioned this earlier about how food, you know, some people can't just view food as fuel and as fuel. And I don't think we have to, or we should. I mean, some people do, and that's totally okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think it can fit in our lives in different ways, right? And so one thing I will tell people is like, we need to normalize emotional eating in the sense of like, for me, pancakes are a very nostalgic food for me. My grandparents always made me pancakes growing up, right? So to me, that is like an emotional thing, right? And not like when I have pancakes, that, right? It brings memories. It's a happy, right? And so normalizing that like it's okay to eat this food and feel some sort of emotion or feel some sort of I guess attachment, you know, if you will, or, you know, besides just the fact that like it doesn't always have to be like, what are these pancakes doing for me, right? What is this food doing for me? It could be like, I like this because this is something that makes me feel good and makes me think, you know, of someone or whatever. So it's I mean, I love when I get these questions, but I hate it at the same time because I'm always like, it's so individual based off the person and like, you know, just their personality too, right? Everybody kind of learns differently. And so that's where Instagram is a really, really cool place, but also it's a challenging place at the same time because it's like, you know, everybody takes what you put out there in relation to what they're doing versus like, this is just a general kind of statement. This is, you know, may apply to you, may not, or you can apply it to your life and how it fits.
Yeah. I love the fact, sorry, Shay, I just want to mention one thing. I love the fact that you brought up the non-negotiables, both on your end as well as their end, because I think that's super, super important. And I appreciate the fact that one of your non-negotiables is fiber, because in this community, it's always protein and water. Fiber, guys, you need your fiber. Yes. Murph and I met discussing poop. I hold poop very dear to me. Got to have your fiber, guys. Especially anyone who's like, yeah, pretty much. Especially anyone very new to this lifestyle post-surgery, you need your fiber. So make sure that is a non-negotiable. Sorry, go ahead, Shane.
Oh, it's all good. No, I was just going to say it's the first time in history that you are communicating a message, and like the way that we communicate with people, I could say the exact same story, but if I'm talking to Haley about it, I'm going to present it and say things a bit differently. If I'm going to talk to Rob about it, I wouldn't really be talking to him because he's kind of the worst. So that's a bad example. No, I'm kidding. But you present it differently depending on the person you're talking with, based on their life history, the relationship you have with them. And so it's a really hard job to try to present information to hit, sometimes 50,000 people or more, because it's going to be taken differently. And so I just kudos, because it's a hard job to do. And I've always taken it in a very, very cool way. But what I was going to ask too, this is always a hot topic. And like, because I'm still newer within the bariatric community, when I started seeing pouch resets talked about, I'm like, what is that? What is a pouch reset? And so, I guess 2 questions related to that. Can you explain what a pouch reset is, and kind of where that idea, like where you've seen that idea come from, and what your thoughts are about it? Because I know that can be kind of a hot topic.
Yeah, it's a very controversial one for sure. I've gotten yelled at a lot for that. One of my favorite things to do is take sort of taboo stuff like that, because I think it's important though, right? So basically a pouch reset is essentially mimics your diet that you would follow immediately post-op. So going right back to when you first had surgery and you're on your liquid diet, and sort of following that through. And essentially the kind of thought behind it is you're resetting your pouch. You are going to shrink it back down to the size that it was, so a lot of times this is encouraged, by surgeons or in Facebook groups or online. And just, when maybe someone's in a weight loss stall, they, haven't, hit their goal weight, they got to get that last 10 pounds off, or they've, had some weight regain. That's commonly where I'll see it. Or when people feel like, geez, I can eat more food, I'm going to do a pouch reset so I can, get back to those smaller portions. The thing that is really, really important to understand here is the post-op diet, when you're on those liquids, when you're on that puree food, when you're on those soft foods, that's not coming from a weight loss perspective. That's so you can heal. You just had major surgery on an organ in your body, right? Your stomach needs to heal. And so that's you're not losing weight because you're eating pureed chicken. Like, that's not the reason you're losing your weight. You're losing weight because you're in a serious, caloric deficit. So a lot of times I've even had people who've never had surgery say, can I follow that? And I'm like, eating pureed chicken is not this, reason why we're losing weight here. So it's kind of just like, I feel like it's, for lack of a better word, it's sort of, what people kind of assume to be a quick, pretty straightforward fix to the problem. But the reality is your stomach is a muscle. I just did a post the other day about like how your diet and your portions progress, because your stomach is a muscle and it's meant to stretch, and you cannot possibly nourish your body to your fullest capacity on those portions that you're eating right after surgery. You cannot nourish your body just on protein shakes, right? Your body needs, like we're talking about, all those macronutrients. So it's definitely a little bit of a diety thing. And again, I totally get the temptation to do it, because just like we talked about, like, you've had this surgery, you want to really make this successful for you. And I understand the sort of temptation behind it for people. And I'm not good. I mean, you probably will lose some weight doing it, but it's not because you're, again, eating the puree food. You're just going back to a severe, calorie restriction. But it's really just a Band-Aid, right? It's not a solution to whatever the underlying causes, are going on here. And I think a lot of times too, it's kind of people jump to it really quickly, and they might not even be doing anything wrong. Like, it's normal to have plateaus. It's totally normal that maybe your surgeon set a goal weight for you, and that's just not appropriate for your body. It's also totally normal that your lowest weight is, for a lot of people, not going to be your forever weight. And that's okay. Again, you're not, usually nourishing your body to that full capacity. So I think it's, kind of fueled by really that obsession of the scale and eating as little as possible. And it's, I mean, what happens though, when you get back to solid foods, right? If we're not working on those habits, whatever's fueling that, we're kind of just back to square one. I mean, are we going to do a pouch reset like every couple of months for the rest of our lives? I mean, it's just not a long-term, solution. It is like I said, I'm not going to deny that you might see some weight loss, but again, it's not because you're going back to that immediate post-op diet. It's because you're,
Yeah.
you know, slashing those calories to nothing pretty quickly there. So
Yeah. And what I would ask myself is like, what else would I be missing out on? And so like, if I did a pouch reset, it's like, oh, well, shoot, then I'm not going to have as much energy then, because I'm not getting as much food, you know, to support my body. I'm going to feel hungry more often. I'm just thinking for myself, like kind of weighing out the pros and cons, right? You know, that could affect my cycle. And like, I might not have a normal cycle at that point. Like, and so it's just interesting that I know the scale weight can be such a driving force for so many of us, but it's thinking about the other aspects of our health that I always try to weigh that up, right? And so it's important to ask yourself with any of those things that you're considering, whether it's a fad thing or whatever. It's like, okay, I might, you know, lose weight, but what else will I also lose? You know, I don't know, just questions I try to ask myself.
yeah, no, and that goes into what I always say, like, what are we adding here, right? And I think it's an important thing to ask yourself too. Is this something I would do for forever? Because if it's not, then okay, why, right? Like, because chances are if it's not, then that's something, maybe it's not the best option as well.
So I have a question that I get asked, and it involves, you know, if you are at that stage in your life or in your weight loss journey where you can incorporate alcohol or anything else, how do you address things like munchies
Mm,
or the hunger you get when under the influence?
that's I've never been asked that before. I don't think. I think that's a
No?
new one. I think that is a
Leave
new
it to Rob to bring it. I like how you said that that's the questions you get from other people. That was really sly.
Their
That you
name
did
is
it
Rob,
that way.
and
That is a really good question. Well, I think the first thing to kind of be thinking about here is, you know, what is sort of the goal, or how do you want that to fit into your lifestyle, right? Because it's like, okay, yeah, you know what, I'm okay with, you know, maybe I don't drink very often, and so when I do, I like to have fun, and like, I'm okay with that because it's not all the time, right? Or geez, I'm finding that I'm having drinks every single weekend, and then I'm having the munchies every weekend, right? Well, how is that in line with our goals, right? Because maybe it's not the munchies that we need to address, maybe it's the
right.
frequency of the alcohol there, right? So that's kind of the first thing I do. But I think in general, surrounding alcohol, it is really important to be intentional with that, right? So I will always tell clients, like, you know, that is something we want to plan out. Like, if you know you're drinking, you really need to be on that hydration all day. You know, you need to eat consistently. You know, if you're going to a party, like, you cannot go to that party on an empty stomach, right? Like, you need to have had a good balanced meal in there, because obviously it's going to hit you a lot faster and a lot, you know, differently. And I mean, I always love to have a plan, and I tell all my clients, if you don't have a plan, you're throwing dry spaghetti at a wall, hoping it's going to stick. And guess what? It's not. So, you know, I think if that is something like, you know, again, we have to be proactive rather than reactive. So, what are some things that we can keep on hand that are ideally mostly in line with our goals, but still going to satisfy that, right? Because what I also don't
Right.
want to do is, I'm not going to sit here and tell you, yeah, eat carrot sticks or celery sticks when you're drunk, because like, chances are that's probably not gonna, you know, right? And then what's happening is you're just looking for all these things, right, to kind of cure it. So what can we do that's going to be in line with both of those things, right? And can we plan ahead, right? Can you have something in the fridge ready to go, so when you get home, like, we've got it there, if that's what's going to happen? But I think more than anything, it's being on the proactive side of, what do I want that to look like for me, in line, you know, while being in line with my goals, right? Obviously, we're also human, and like, nobody can plan for everything, you know,
Yep.
100% of the time. And, you know, I think that's where also, you know, being mindful and, you know, giving yourself a little grace, in the sense of like, okay, maybe that didn't go quite as well as I wanted it to. So like, what am I going to do, you know, next time? Or am I going to put that limit, you know, on my drinks, or whatever, you know, it may be, and setting those boundaries for yourself to where you feel comfortable, right? I think it's all about those boundaries. And that's one thing I will tell clients. I'm like, I can't tell you those boundaries. I can't tell you what you're going to feel, you know, that's something you want to decide, you know, for yourself, because again, going back to what's going to be, you know, from a longevity standpoint.
Mhm. Well,
Great
and
answer.
practically how that could look. I think about you, Haley, actually, when I do this, because popcorn is something that I love still. And like it
Mhm.
sits well with me. It does fine. But you had this image, and I was probably a while ago, but like where you can pair stuff with
Mhm.
popcorn, for an example. So I'll think about you sometimes when I'm like, ooh, like popcorn sounds really good. Like I feel like
Mhm.
snacking on that. It's like, okay, then I might also, so popcorn is like a carbohydrate. And maybe some fat in there, depending on what kind of popcorn you have. But it's like, okay, then I might pair that with a piece of cheese so I can get a bit of protein and fat with it as well to make more of that balanced snack. Or I might have a slice of deli meat in addition so I can get some protein with it. And so I just, for my mind, I love having the ability to go, what can I add to make this more nutritionally valuable for me? And I still get to have popcorn. Like, you know, I feel like that's I don't really drink, but I feel like if I did I love popcorn even sober. So I feel like that's a common snack that one might have when they're intoxicated.
I wouldn't know. But I
Yeah.
was actually
Yeah.
just I was imagining you with this big bowl of popcorn and then just like a chicken breast inside there. I'm like, that's not a good
Yeah,
pair.
perfect. I just like
I'm
fork
like,
and
just
knife,
okay,
like
just gnawing on a chicken breast and
Yeah.
popcorn.
hey,
It's
why
all
not?
about balance.
Exactly. Just a little tiny bite of it and chewing tons and tons and then just popcorn.
That's exactly at my Friday night. You just described it. That was
Yeah.
perfect.
Chicken and popcorn. Hey man. Chicken and waffles works. Why not chicken and popcorn?
There you go.
It doesn't work. It doesn't work. I tried.
Well, it goes back to like you know, honoring like physically what you or mentally what you want and physically what you need, you
Right.
know, as
Yes,
well.
I love that.
We can have both of those things at the same time. And I think when you're drinking, it's a little harder because it's like you're not
Yeah.
fully likely as in tune, right? One thing too that I'll have clients do, this is not really related to alcohol, but I guess it could be helpful. I will have clients based off what groceries they have in their refrigerator and in their pantry, write lists and keep it on their fridge, like all the combinations of like, okay, I have deli meat, I can have that with the blueberries, I can have that with carrots and hummus, I can have that you know, with peppers and whatever, right? So I guess that could be helpful too if you're
Yeah.
like, okay, these are my things, this is the snacky food I want, but from these, which one am I gonna have here, right? Because the
Yeah.
more we can autopilot things,
Yes.
the
For
better.
sure.
I was thinking of like drunk snack packs or like drunk Lunchables or
Yeah,
something. where you can-
Dude,
yeah,
honestly, I like as someone who sometimes has fun, definitely plan ahead. It makes such a big difference. If you know you are going to be in that state, if you know that you have some control there and you know you're going to be at a specific state and you've intentionally planned that you are going to be in that state at some point that night, have something there ready for you. You know, look at the menu ahead of time. Talk to
Mhm.
your wife or your friend. Say, hey, when we're at that point where we're gonna start ordering food, and I'm at that point where I'm probably not gonna make the best decision, this is what I want you to order for me.
Mhm.
Right? Like I found that that's been very helpful if you have a friend or a spouse who is active with your journey, who's willing to do that, or who's someone who's gonna call you out on it. Right? Like there's nothing wrong with having fun occasionally, but again, as you had mentioned, what are your goals and what's the direction that you're going towards? And are you making decisions that will meld those two worlds together and allow you to move forward with that? And I think oftentimes when we think of having fun or going to parties or doing any of these things, it's sort of in I know in sort of diet culture and where I was before, it was the idea that I'm going to be sitting at this party looking at all these guys eating the food that I want to eat, and I'm going to be having a crap time because I
with
want
your
to eat
own
that, and I'm
pre-packed like little what
yeah, and
snack,
there I
like just
am like just rolling some
trying.
prosciutto and just chewing it. But yeah, that's the thing, right? Like you can have all of that, but it's just how do we do it? So I'm not eating the full pizza and I'm having a piece of pizza and I'm choosing the pizza that has the vegetables and the meat on it as opposed to the one that's just all meat and bacon and pepperoni and all that stuff, right? So yeah, plan ahead, guys. It definitely is there and there is nothing wrong with having fun. That's the whole reason we did this journey is to be happy and have fun, but how do we do so responsibly with what our goals are? So I sound like an alcoholic, eh?
No
Guys,
judgment.
just drink.
Yes.
Oh my
Well,
God.
speaking of that, if Rob needed some support from you, Haley, which it sounds like he might, not alcohol support, but
No, it's just support in general. This guy's struggling.
yeah, no, but dietary support. What's the best way that we can like find you? Are you accepting one-on-one clients right now? Can you just tell us like how, like where people can find you?
Yeah, so definitely the easiest way is right on my Instagram. You can either send me a message or the link that is in my bio is an application to work with me. And that just kind of helps me get to know you and what your goals are and that kind of thing. So you can fill that out. I believe also on my Instagram, it has a link directly to send me an email as well. I'm not the best with email. So many revolving pieces, but yeah, so you can go, I would say through my Instagram is probably the best way, or directly on my website, which is just my name, HaleyLemieux.com. And there's a little contact form on there as well. I am accepting clients right now. I did take a break for a couple months and just was like focusing on what I had, but I've love and hate relationship when clients graduate out and they can fly their own wings and leave me. It's a great thing. It's a sad thing all at once. So I do have some spots open currently, and regardless of what stage, I have clients at all different stages. I mean, I've had clients come to me before they have surgery, and I've had clients who had surgery when I was in kindergarten. So all across, I'm not even exaggerating, all across the board. And I think that's, one of the things too, is a lot of times people think it's too late, but it's never too late to refocus and realign yourself. So, yeah, Instagram and TikTok, the Guac'Ward Dietitian. Yeah.
That's an awesome name, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
I enjoy that so much.
When I first started my page, I didn't even come up with it. I asked my sister-in-law, I was like, I need a cool, like, punny name. And she's like, how about the Guac'Ward Dietitian? And I was like, perfect.
Perfect.
Done deal.
Love it.
Yep. So
that's awesome.
Well, it's perfect. It's perfect. Well, if you could leave kind of like words of wisdom, something that you feel like is just like this is your soapbox. What's kind of something that you want to like leave our audience with?
Oh man, this is a tough one.
A lot of pressure. I presented that in a really big way.
I think I will say this time, going back to like what we were talking about with those non-negotiables, and really aligning yourself with those. It's actually really funny because like that's something I talk about a lot. And one of my clients was telling me how she was talking to someone else, who had surgery or whatever, and they had no idea what she was talking about when she said non-negotiables. And I was like, oh, honey, I was like, that's just kind of something I say. I was like, I'm not that I coined the term. I'm like, but not every bariatric center is going out here telling, patients that. But I truly think that's so important. Like, what are those universal ones, just like we talked about? And also being in line with what are yours as an individual, right? So that's how we can morph those lives, together, right? Is it like we talked about, meal prepping? Is it, for some of my clients who, maybe religion is really important to them and they need to do their Bible study, first thing when they wake up? Like, what are the things, in addition to being a bariatric patient, what are those things that help you to really like be your, best version of yourself and thrive at your full capacity? Because I think we put so much emphasis on being a bariatric patient and eating your protein. And if we're not doing those other things, it's going to make it so much more challenging to be that bariatric patient. And I think you mentioned this, Shay, like not putting yourself first and, and taking care of those other things and making yourself that priority. So I make my clients, it's one of the first things I make them do is literally like write out what those are for themselves. So, being in tune with that. And that's a forever thing, truly. And those can change over time too. Like your non-negotiables now might be different than they are in 2 years. And that's okay. But whatever they are for you at that point in time, making sure we're in tune with them and honoring them and knowing that it's okay to make yourself that priority to be able to do those things for yourself.
I love it. Make yourself a priority. That's such a big thing. I think we all need to do that moving forward. All right, guys, that's all the time we've got tonight. Shay, can you share with everyone what we got going on next week, please?
Yeah, I was prepared. I could see
Oh
your
man,
wheels
I was gonna try to
spinning.
trick
You were like,
you.
should I ask or not? I'm glad you asked. So
Sorry.
next week, yeah, next week we have Stephanie, the bariatric warrior, who's also part of the Road to Discovery podcast. She's going to be on next week, and it's going to be a little bit of a different timing because she's a nurse, and so her work schedule needed, we had to kind of work around that, which we were happy to do. So instead of 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, you guys are going to have to take like, an extra cup of coffee that day or something, because we're going to do it at. That's right. We'll channel Java Murph so that way we can be there 10 p.m. next week, and we'll share all of the information about that. But super excited to have her on. And if you guys haven't already listened to the Road to Discovery podcast, go do that. The latest episode that they have is with me, Rob, and Murph. So it was pretty fun. So come join us next week. And we're excited to have you. But thank you so much for being here, Haley. Make sure you guys go follow her. She is just wonderful. And I swear, something about the images that you use, like I think about them often, like they stick in my head. So she's just a great resource, a great person. So make sure you guys go follow her. And yeah, thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you so
thank
much
you.
for having me. This was so fun.
Thanks. Thank you, Haley, for sharing your expertise with us tonight. And thanks so much to all of you guys for joining us on the Waiting Table podcast, where we're serving the weight loss community
1 pound at a time. Tried to sound like Murph.
God, oh my God.
Was that good?
All right.
Was that good?
That was good.
Yeah.
That was good. But he's deeper than 1 pound at a time.
1 pound at a time.
And then I get jealous.
Like
I have like a high voice. Hey guys, 1 pound at a time.
No. This is our dancing outro, Haley. You can join us if you want.
And then this is where I judge
We usually hit it with one of these things. We try to get Rob to do it.
I'll be a villain, I guess.
Oh, I can get the other half depending on where. Hold on, I'm going to move our screens. Okay, go ahead.
There
do
you
it
go.
again.
Wait. Other hand.
Yes,
there you go.
Other one.
There you go.
Yes.
Why is that such a struggle?
I love it.
That's amazing. Thank you guys. Have a good night.
Bye.